On our planet, there are places so terrifying that they can horrify even the most seasoned enthusiast. Some of them will make your blood run cold, while others could easily drive you insane. So, up next are the scariest places on our planet. The Byberry Psychiatric Hospital in Philadelphia is known as the hospital with the most chilling and tragic fate. Originally built as a small farm, it soon became the final refuge for the most hopeless patients, cast out from other hospitals. These people no longer had any chance of ever leaving Byberry. It's no surprise that, starting from the mid-20th century, there were more than enough incurably mentally ill patients, and the hospital began to experience unprecedented demand. But with so many often extremely aggressive people who had sometimes committed the most serious crimes in their lives, the hospital had no chance of coping by civilized means. Workers who visited the asylum recounted how the patients, most of whom were completely naked, huddled together as tightly as possible out of fear and cold and defecated right on the floor, which in no way affected the feelings of the specially selected, utterly callous staff. Such horrors continued year after year. Some patients said that they were chained to their beds for many months in a row. Others spoke of inhumane torture inflicted on the most unruly and defiant individuals. It even got to the point where one person was dismembered and hidden on the hospital grounds, and the killer was never found. Many also mentioned the frequent appearance of ghosts on the hospital grounds, the souls of people tortured to death, unable to find peace. What is truly horrifying is that, even though reports of the staff's terrible behavior and the appalling unsanitary conditions were submitted for 3 decades in a row, the government authorities did not make a single attempt to change anything. It was only at the end of the 1990s that a thorough investigation was conducted, and after the investigators' shocking report, a decision was made to close this dreadful place. For many years, the building of the Byberry Psychiatric Clinic remained abandoned, becoming a kind of mecca for Satanists who performed their ritual ceremonies there. An incredibly fascinating, yet at the same time the most mysterious and eerie religion in the world, the religion of Voodoo originated, and became most widespread in the West African republics. According to historians, Voodoo descended from the oldest religion on earth, which emerged alongside the rise of African civilization. In the city of Lomé, the capital of the African Republic of Togo, there is perhaps one of the creepiest places on the planet, where Voodoo practitioners from all over the world gather. The so-called Akodesewa market is the main magical market on the planet. It is unlikely that anyone would remain indifferent after visiting this place. Out in the open air, there are numerous rows filled with frightening goods, bones, herbs, potions, severed heads and limbs of wild animals, and much more. Long wooden counters are piled high with heaps of heads, tails, flayed skins, and other unimaginable and terrifying items. Sorcerers from all over Africa come here in search of ingredients for their terrifying rituals. But aside from the sorcerers, hundreds of ordinary people wander the market, looking for solutions to their everyday problems. Some want to be cured of illness, others seek to become stronger and more resilient, while some wish to cast a curse on their enemy. Often the ritual begins right on the spot. The vendor makes 3 deep cuts on his chest or back, while at the same time the person in need rubs a healing powder of highly questionable quality into themselves. And after smoking a certain type of herbal mixture, the person goes on a trip. They lose control of themselves and begin to see hallucinations. Often, people see their own future. The sensations from these substances are so realistic that virtual reality is mere child's play compared to the magic of voodoo potions. But the consequences of such acts can be truly disastrous for a person. After all, it's no coincidence that the term zombie is so closely associated with voodoo practices. Poveglia, the island of the dead, the gates to hell, one of the most terrifying and chilling places on the planet. It all began in the 15th century, during the years when the plague was raging across Europe. Cities were piled high with corpses that couldn't be buried in time. The decomposing bodies spread stench and disease, and it was at that time that they remembered Poveglia, turning it into a kind of quarantine zone for plague victims. To stop the epidemic, not only were corpses brought to the island, but also living people who had been infected, leaving them there alone to face their death without any help. People, including children and women, were thrown into pits along with the bodies or burned alive in an attempt to stop the plague with fire. By the most conservative estimates, more than 160,000 infected people were killed here. But despite its grim reputation, in the 20th century the island was once again used for the forced isolation of people. In 1922, a psychiatric hospital for the mentally ill was opened here, and at that time, enemies of the ruling fascist regime of Benito Mussolini were also sent there. The chief physician of this place was given complete carte blanche to conduct the most sophisticated experiments on his charges, using the latest treatment methods that more closely resembled medieval torture. Patients at the clinic often complained that at night they heard strange whispers, moans, weeping, and even screams. Some of the island's involuntary residents saw people appearing out of nowhere, who would then burn up right before their eyes, turning into a pile of ashes. All these incidents went unnoticed until the hospital staff began to hear and see the same things as the patients. The chief physician died 2 years later, falling from the bell tower. Moreover, the circumstances of his death remain unsolved to this day. Either he took his own life in a fit of madness, or he was thrown off by the insane patients who had grown tired of enduring his sadistic experiments. Today, Poveglia Island is closed to tourists, and its territory is heavily guarded against unauthorized entry. The few who have managed to get past the guards and set foot on the island all claim with one voice that true evil resides on Poveglia. And they strongly advise not even attempting to go there. In the Sicilian city of Palermo, beneath the Cathedral of St. Mary, lies one of the creepiest places on the planet, the Capuchin Catacombs. Unlike any other catacombs, the entire interior of the St. Mary Catacombs consists solely of mummified and embalmed bodies. For a long time, the catacombs were considered the most elite cemetery, where the most distinguished and famous people were buried. The tradition of burying people in the catacombs began as far back as the 16th century. The first Capuchin monk was buried there as early as 1599. It turned out that the unique composition of the soil and atmosphere in the catacombs slows down organic processes and halts the decomposition of bodies. Before burial, the deceased were dried in special chambers for 8 months and then either hung up, laid out along the walls, or placed in special niches. Not only monks were buried in the catacombs, but also the most generous benefactors of the monastery. At that time, for any layperson, it was a great honor to be buried in the crypt of Santa Maria. Over time, the crypt became cramped, and the Capuchins began digging long corridors to bury more and more bodies. And although in 1837 a ban was introduced on open burials, the relatives of the deceased still found ways to circumvent this restriction. They would leave windows in the coffins, allowing the body of the buried to be seen. A final ban on such burials was imposed only in 1882. The most chilling burials in the catacombs are the mummified children, some of whom have remained in almost perfect condition for many decades. The catacombs are the resting place of the ancestors of many well-known people living in the city today. And on the Day of the Dead, the descendants of those whose mummies are on public display descend into the catacombs. Pompeii was destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, during which thousands of people perished. The city was only discovered at the end of the 18th century, and the scientists were astonished when they discovered perfectly preserved buildings and household items, food, and the frozen bodies of people. At first, the strange statues, which did not conform to classical standards, puzzled the archaeologists. But when one of these statues was accidentally broken and human remains were found inside, everything became clear. Hundreds of human tragedies were frozen in stone. On one street, a couple was found. A woman, apparently pregnant judging by the folds of her clothing, and a man who had tried to shield her with his arms from the pumice stones falling from the sky. In one of the houses, a mother with 3 children was discovered. The children didn't even have time to wake up. People clung to each other, trying to shield themselves from the ash with their hands. Many people ran to the harbor, and some lucky ones managed to sail far enough away to avoid burning alive or suffocating in the ash. But the majority of the city's population was doomed. Today, Pompeii has become an open-air museum of antiquity. Anyone can visit this eerie monument of world history and see the frozen tragedy of the past with their own eyes.